Hey Internet, it's me again, your favorite cyberpunk. And I have once again come to bestow info-hazardous knowledge upon you like the good content farmer I am. Today we will of course be talking about the Cyberpunk RED tabletop role-playing game, which is a kinda sorta prequel to Cyberpunk 2077, a computer game that you might have heard of before. This also means I get to have actual gameplay footage in the background, so that you may listen to my dulcet tones while watching me give up on my stealth netrunner build in favor of beating a man to death with a rusty tire iron I found on the side of the road. As for the actual content of this video, we've got quite the itinerary. Today you'll be learning not only about the lore and setting of Cyberpunk RED, but also how to go about creating a character and play the game itself. I'll try to fit as much as possible into this video without making it feature length, but if you find anything I missed, feel free to discuss it in the comments. And while you're down there, you might as well like and subscribe. I mean, the buttons are right there. It would be so easy just to mouse over and click them. I mean, with all that being said, it's about time we actually started this video, and I can't think of a way any more cliche than a forced chapter transition. For the purpose of keeping our focus on Cyberpunk RED, we'll be starting our timeline off in the year 2022. No, not that one. This 2022 is a bit different than the one you were forced to slog through however long ago. You see, around the 80s and 90s in the Cyberpunk timeline, technology got a sudden massive boom and advanced far beyond the stuff we have today as a result of basically every tech company completely giving up on the concept of morality. After that, all you really need to do is fast forward a few decades, start around 3-ish corporate wars, completely disintegrate the idea of human decency, and just like that, you've got the OG cyberpunk dystopia. Alright, so the year is 2022 in case you weren't keeping track, and we've a fourth corporate war to start with only 2 individuals to get it kicked off. The first is the netrunner Alt Cunningham, generally considered to be the second best in the world behind Raish Bartmos. The second, and less important of the two, is her boyfriend, rocker boy Johnny Silverhand. The main reason Johnny is even being brought up here is because it was him who convinced Rogue and Morgan Blackhand to raid Arasaka Tower, which ended with 2 nukes being dropped on the building, thus starting the Fourth Corporate War. Now, as you might expect from a war that started with one side's headquarters being reduced to irradiated rubble, the initial conflict was less of a traditional war and more just Militech and Arasaka obliterating anything and everything with the obscene amount of nukes both companies managed to stockpile, which, as you could expect, caused various governments like the NUSA and China to begin chucking their own nukes. Which means that one man trying to save his girlfriend in the dumbest way possible directly led to nuclear Armageddon. At least I can be consoled by the fact that he got bisected by Atom Smasher, even if he won't admit it. As for what any of this means to your characters or games, it's the Fourth Corporate War that started a period of the Cyberpunk timeline known as the RED, which you may recognize from the title of the game. The hallmarks of this period are fairly straightforward in terms of storytelling. First and foremost, the sky is now a lovely shade of blood red as a result of the ever-present nuclear fallout blanketing the Earth. Then there's the fact that any major governments or corporations that survived the war are currently in a state of reconstruction, causing most places to exist in a pseudo-lawless state. As for important locations, most cities were actually able to survive getting nuked, with Night City standing out as having been double nuked, leaving an uninhabitable combat zone at Ground Zero. However, humanity still clings to life, even as we all try to destroy each other, slowly rebuilding from the damage of a nuclear holocaust and leaving plenty of work for any aspiring solos. Which of course leads me to my next point. You. Getting started with the gritty part of the video, Cyberpunk RED presents 3 different methods of character creation for you to follow. These methods are in order: pre-gen, quick and dirty, and complete package. Getting started with the most basic of these, pre-gen is exactly what it says on the box. Rather than taking the time to manually build up a character, you instead choose a preset template and attach your character's identity onto it. Next up, there's quick and dirty, which trades away pre-gen's predetermined stats and leaves your fate in the hands of RNGesus. This allows you to quickly build up your character while still being able to pick and choose your individual stats. Last but not least, there's the complete package, allowing you to manually calculate each stat by drawing from pools of points. Needless to say, this is the method we will be discussing in today's video, as it's the most detailed and gives us an opportunity to go over each of the stats this game has to offer. So let's go ahead and get into it. First and foremost, we have what could be considered the most important step of character creation: your class. This determines just what your character is built to do, as well as the areas they struggle in. Starting with the most straightforward option, the solo is your no-nonsense hired killer of the bunch with a suite of abilities geared around being the most lethal thing in the fight and avoiding dangerous mishaps. On the exact opposite end of the spectrum, the exec is geared around taking the heat off of yourself by abusing the power of your corporate income and sending gangs of expendable mooks to go do your dirty work. In a similar, if less cynical vein, the lawman is able to call in backup to a risky situation as a middle finger to anybody who isn't prepared to have a SWAT team drop directly on their head. Moving to the opposite side of the law, the rocker boy or rocker girl, depending on which stance you're swinging from, is all about being a charismatic thirst trap screaming down with the system to a massive crowd that is absolutely not listening. Of course, these enthusiastic morons wouldn't get nearly as much traction if it weren't for the media following them around and recording their shows, possibly in the hope of uncovering a scandal to blackmail them with. Next up, after that disaster waiting to happen, we have a class surprisingly familiar to any Cyberpunk 2077 fans. The Fixer is the social butterfly of the roster, focusing on using their cunning and charisma to make deals and get themselves out of trouble. Next up, after that, we have a homeless vagrant, otherwise known as a nomad, who also happens to own the sickest whip you've ever laid eyes on. Seriously, that's their whole role ability, is that they have access to a pool of specialized vehicles that they can get their ride from. After the Nomad, we have the Tech, who is unsurprisingly good with technology. Whether it be weapons, gear, or cybernetics, the Tech's gonna monkey around with it until it either works or explodes. In a similar vein, we have the Med Tech, which is all about keeping people alive through the power of modern medicine, or at least long enough for you to leave their entire family in the kind of medical debt they can never hope to pay back. It is a neo-capitalist hellscape out there, and one man's debt is another man's reliable income source. Last but not least, for our classes, or roles, or whatever I'm calling them now, we have the Netrunner. The reason I saved the Netrunner for last is due to the fact that this class is an absolute freak with an entire extra set of game mechanics which you will commit to memory on pain of the Game Master eating your dice. So here's the simplified tutorial, so I don't have to spend an entire hour explaining this. If it's your first time playing Cyberpunk RED, don't play a Netrunner. If not, then read over the net running rules in the core rulebook and determine your course of action in accordance with the severity of the resulting headache. After that, we have our core attributes, which are intelligence, reflexes, dexterity, technique, cool, willpower, luck, move, body, and empathy, which each describes some fundamental aspect of your character. Intelligence, reflexes, and dexterity are each pretty self-explanatory, with intelligence covering how smart your character is, reflexes determining their reaction time, and dexterity describing how physically capable they are. Next up is technique, which broadly covers your character's ability to utilize tools in their day-to-day life. After that, we have cool and willpower, which lay out the broad strokes of your character's mental state, deciding how charming and determined they are respectively. Next up, we have luck, which serves as one of the more out there traits in the context of a tabletop game. After all, how exactly are you supposed to represent a lucky character in a game where the success of their actions comes down to a dice roll? Well, the way luck works in practice is that rather than it being a normal stat which you could roll like the others, luck operates by providing you with a number of points with which to offset the results of your dice rolls. The way this works in practice is that before you roll for a skill check or attack, you take a luck point from your pool, then add or subtract it from the result of the dice roll. After that, we have Move, which simply determines how quickly you can move during combat or other such encounters. Then there's Body, which determines how much of a meat slab you are, with this stat specifically correlating to the actual size of your character. And last but not least, we have Empathy, which represents your character's ability to consider the thoughts and feelings of others, and directly correlates with your Humanity stat, which we will cover in a bit. Moving on from the attributes, we have your character's skills, which are used to determine their chances of success at a given task, and are quite numerous. Okay, if we go over each individual stat, we're going to be here for an hour, so let's go ahead and break this down. Fortunately, the game divides its skills into a few different categories, which we'll be able to go through one by one. Awareness covers your character's ability to perceive and discern details about their environment and other characters. Body skills determine how tough and athletic your character is without the use of cyberware. Control skills are primarily focused around your character's ability to operate different kinds of vehicles or sometimes even living mounts. Education skills are the most broad category by a decent margin and refer to the different kinds of knowledge your character has gathered over the course of their life. Fighting skills refer to how good your character is in a melee fight. Performance skills are basically how good your character is at entertaining others. Ranged weapon skills unsurprisingly refer to your character's ability to use any kind of weapon used to hit something from a distance. Social skills represent all the different ways your character is able to negotiate with and manipulate other people. And finally, technique skills are your character's ability to perform highly technical tasks. Moving on from that monolith of a stat block, we have our derived stats in the form of health and humanity. Starting with the more basic of the two, health is calculated using the following equation. Yep. What do you mean you don't know how to average two numbers? You forgot? Alright, fine, here's a chart, plug in the numbers it tells you to, then find the corresponding value and put that on your character sheet. No thinking required. Beyond that, health determines how many bullets, knives, and oddly shaped rocks can be violently rammed into your body before you keel over dead. Next up, we have humanity, which operates a little differently than health and is a bit easier to calculate. Simply put, your humanity is equal to your max empathy times 10, and represents how close your character is to having a mental breakdown. The most common way this is represented is through cyberpsychosis, which, as an aside, and contrary to what some sources will show you, is not a physiological condition. As the name would imply, cyberpsychosis is a psychological condition that manifests as a character slowly brings their own personal power fantasy into real life through the use of cybernetics. Symptoms such as tremors, blurred vision, and loss of balance come as a result of overusing immunoblockers, while symptoms like hallucinations, lower impulse control, and combat cyberware randomly jumping into an active state can represent a character falling into a state of cyberpsychosis. Another important detail to note is that cyberpsychosis doesn't always manifest as outright aggression, and in fact can take a variety of forms. For example, a corpo executive might suddenly begin making a ton of extremely risky business deals without any form of leverage. Ultimately, cyberpsychosis is something your character will likely have to deal with at some point in a game, especially in a longer running game. However, it's up to you and your GM as to how that manifests. Skipping over the biography section of the character sheet, we have weapons, armor, and cybernetics making up the next stretch of your character creation. Weapons are fairly straightforward, with ranged weapons taking the attacker's reflex and weapon skill into account before adding the result to a d10 roll against a defender's DV, determined by their range or their dexterity and evasion on a d10 roll if they're able to dodge. As for melee, you'll be rolling a d10 with your dexterity and a melee skill against the same evasion roll. Last but not least, for our final stage of character creation, we have the endgame of late-stage neoliberal hypercapitalism, cybernetics. In total, there are 8 types of cyberware available to the player, not counting any weird shit that possibly exists in a random sourcebook that I have yet to read. Going in no particular order, these are fashionware, neuralware, cyber optics, cyber audio, internal and external body cyberware, cyber limbs, and boardware. Of course, on top of each of these categories are foundational cyberware, which serve as a basic augment upon which most others are mounted, with the exception of fashionware because drip does not require a foundation. Rapid firing through the rest of these because this section is almost over. Dear God, please let me out. Neuralware augments the way your brain and nervous system work and uses a neural link as its foundation. Cyber optics obviously replace your eyes and use cyber eyes as a base, which, mind you, are purchased one at a time. Cyber audio augments a character's hearing and uses the cyber audio suite. External cyberware outs me as a liar because, much like fashion wear, it doesn't require a foundation. However, it's also lying because it's all about subdermal armor and putting hidden compartments inside your body. Cyber limbs are possibly the most broad category, possessing 4 foundational parts in the cyber arms, hands, legs, and feet, as well as a set of generic options which can be applied to any cyber limb. Finally, we have Borgware, which is less about adding mechanical parts to an existing body and more about taking the essential bits of a person and putting them into a robot body. Or more broadly, making extreme changes to the pre-existing human body, such as multiple eyes or limbs, or maybe just a whole new skeleton if that's what you're feeling like. When characters talk about going full Borg, this is the kind of stuff they're referring to. Alright, you've survived character creation and now it's time to actually nut up and figure out how to play the game. Starting with your basic materials, if you're playing Cyberpunk RED on tabletop, you'll need the applicable rulebooks for the game you'll be running, which is fairly easy as the official Telsorian Games website has a laundry list of free PDFs to draw from at any time. As for your dice, you'll be taking a few d10s to serve as your main dice you'll be rolling for attacks and skill checks. I recommend taking around 4 to 6 to share around the table, but if each player can bring along at least 2, that would be ideal. If you don't have any d10s, or find rating the 0 on one of them to be a bit of a head trip, you can sub in a d20 and divide the result by 2, making sure to round down as you do so. After that, you'll also want to take a good number of d6s to serve as your damage dice, and I recommend bringing at least 10 along on account of some weapons dealing quite a bit of damage. Don't worry, I haven't found any guns that actually deal 10 d6 damage yet. However, especially in longer running games, weapons dealing 5d6 per shot can be expected. Beyond that, it's basically your standard tabletop gaming fare, so however you prefer to run your sessions might as well be the correct way as far as I'm concerned. Of course, having the proper materials to run a game is only like 46% of the battle, and since I just spent all of this time explaining what sort of dice your GM will be feasting on by the end of a given session, I figured you should at least know how to roll them before they're consumed. Starting with your d10s, these are the dice you'll be using to make all of your basic rolls from skill checks to attacks. The way this works is that the GM will first decide the difficulty value, or DV, you'll be rolling against. This determines the number you'll have to beat with your roll. It's also worth noting that it's entirely up to the GM to decide whether or not the player knows the DV of a given skill check when they roll. With that in mind, a player will then add up their relevant skills and attributes to determine their bonus, which will be added to the number they roll. In addition, if the result of the d10 was a 10, then the player will roll another d10, adding its result to their total. For example, let's say Timmy the Rocker Boy needs to impress this record label exec with his sick-ass theremin skills. Time is ticking and this is his only chance to avoid falling into obscurity. But the exec's a fun-hating tight ass, so it won't be easy. The GM starts by setting a DV of 28 Timmy will need to surpass in order to succeed. Adding together the values from his tech attribute and play instrument skill, Timmy comes up with a bonus of plus 14 to his performance roll. Even with a crit, it's a long shot. In order to meet the DV, Timmy would need to roll a natural 10 and at least a 5 on his bonus die to succeed. Looking over to his luck pool, Timmy sees only 1 point left, remembering that he spent the rest playing the concert just beforehand. With no other options, Timmy spends his last point of luck and lets the first die roll, watching it tumble down and just barely land on a 10. It's not over. There's still a chance for Timmy to come out on top. All he needs to do is roll high enough to beat the DV. Having played a few sessions by now, Timmy understands that simply matching the DV won't be enough to pass. He needs to beat it, and so he lets his next d10 go. For a moment the die rolls and rolls and rolls some more, before slowing down to teeter on its side, taunting Timmy with the possibilities. Could it be a 3, maybe a 10, or even a 9? No, it's a 4. With this roll, Timmy only just meets the DV, barely failing the skill test. With a single failed test, Timmy the Rocker Boy's musical career comes to a screeching halt before it can even get started. Or at least, that's what would have happened if our boy hadn't spent a single point of luck, allowing him to bump up his result by 1 and just barely eke out a success on this brutally difficult skill check. Of course, Cyberpunk RED is full of moments like this and many others, ranging from something as simple as a netrunner bypassing the security system on a secret corpo lab, to something so thrilling as a tech giving some poor cyber psycho a high-velocity prefrontal lobotomy with a brand new weapon they just cooked up. As for your d6 damage dice, they work pretty much how you'd expect them to. You roll however many dice, add up the results to get a total, and that's the amount of damage you deal to the target. Or healing if that's what you're trying to do. They work more or less the same way. Now all of this talk about rolling dice and how to do it wouldn't be too much help if you didn't even know when you were allowed to roll in the first place. Which leads us into combat and the initiative order. Obviously, life in the dark future isn't exactly peaceful, and eventually your character will get wrapped up in combat or other tense encounters over the course of a campaign. In-game, these encounters are handled through initiative, which determines the order in which each character in the scene is able to act over the course of a round. At the start of combat, initiative is determined by each participant rolling a d10 with their reflex modifier, with the highest result going first, while the lowest has to sit and wait like a good little When the fuck did I write this? Once all that's done, it's time to get into the combat turn, which is remarkably simple. During a combat turn, each character gains 1 move action and 1 combat action for a total of 2. I won't go into detail about all the different kinds of actions you can take just because there are so many different options with their own little quirks, which would increase the length of this video by an order of magnitude if I were to include them. All that being said, you should have enough of an understanding to get started actually playing Cyberpunk RED, which I suppose means it's time to end this video. So that was Cyberpunk RED, a kind of niche science fiction TTRPG. Or at least, that's how it can feel when your point of comparison is Dungeons & Dragons of all things. This is a tabletop gaming YouTube video, I had to mention it at least once, even if it was completely tasteless. But hey, now you know how to play a new game. And if you're already familiar with the system, you have a shiny new way to take away your friends' excuses for not getting into it. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you like me, subscribe to the channel. And never forget to wait until after the netrunner checks security to go through the door.
DJ, how to be a psychopath, 101.
Can I help you? Actually, no, you can help me. Go forth and kill, my minion.
Hey, you're doing it again, you're becoming insane.
Alright, time for everybody to blow up!
Of course you're gonna blow.